So my name's Tatiana Murphy-Wheeler, and my project is on calcitonin gene-related peptide and its role in migraine treatment. And next slide. So my presentation includes an introduction, a discussion of migraine's impact on society, an exploration of the trigeminal system, explanation of what CGRP is, and then looking into some CGRP-based treatments, and then discussion. Next slide. Okay, introduction. Next slide. So a little bit about me. I'm an 11th grader at Culver City High School, which is located just outside of Los Angeles. I'm really interested in environmental science and policy, mental health, neuroscience, and especially how they intersect through the lens of public health. Also, I want to apologize. I'm very sick right now, so my voice is a little wonky. And my mentor was Sage M. Next slide, please. So my project was writing a research paper on the role of CGRP in migraine pain and treatment. Right now, I'm almost done. I'm just putting in my finishing touches, formatting everything, and then I'm planning to submit to some high school journals. Next slide, please. Okay, so now looking into migraine's impact. Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. So to understand migraines, it's really important to understand how they infect the individuals who experience them. And so it's important to understand the symptoms. So there's two types, the first being prodromal symptoms. And these can include fatigue, mood changes, frequent yawning, and they're all hours before the onset of the headache, versus aura, which are like visual disturbances, tremor, difficulty speaking, and those are shortly before onset. So it's really clear that migraines have a very significant impact on the people who experience them. Next slide, please. So 1.1 billion people are affected by migraine annually. This was taken in 2019, so it's likely that the number has gone up since then. And then $78 billion are spent by the US on migraine annually as well. Next slide, please. So now for the trigeminal system. Next slide, please. So this system is the collection of sensory neurons, primary afferent C fibers, A delta fibers, and associated vasculature that make up the trigeminal nerve. So this nerve has an impact on cerebral arteries, meningeal arteries, the central nervous system, and the dura. Next slide, please. The dura, the ophthalmic branch's innervation into the dura was found to cause pain in the ipsilateral eye, ipsilateral temporal region, and the forehead, which are all regions affected by migraine pain as well. And another study also found that the stimulation of the dura resulted in heightened sensitivity to touch and heat in rats, which is also a symptom associated with aura. So this branch's innervation into the dura is really associated with migraine and could be responsible for the pain that sufferers from migraine experience. Next slide, please. So now for CGRP. Next slide, please. This is found in the unmyelinated C fibers, of which stimulate arteries both dural and cerebral. So like what we were talking about earlier. They dilate arterioles and maintain normal levels of blood flow in the brain, but it does not cause pain itself. So it actually has a very vital role in just normal human functioning. But in people who experience migraine, it's likely that it causes some sort of cascade effect, which leads to the pain that these people experience during prodromal and aura. Next slide, please. So it's found to be released in significant amounts during migraine attacks, and it was also found in significant amounts in the brainstem. Infusion of CGRP led to delayed headache and other migraine symptoms, but it's important to note again that CGRP itself is not causing the pain. It's causing some sort of downstream signaling cascade, which is inducing the attack. And then also in patients with chronic migraines or histories of migraines, CGRP levels were found to be chronically elevated. Next slide, please. Okay, so because of all of this, it's clear that CGRP has a large role in causing the pain associated with migraine, which is one of the most debilitating parts of people who experience migraine. So scientists have started looking into treatments that utilize CGRP and work to prevent this cascade effect. Next slide, please. So there's two main areas of treatment, and these are gepants, which are small molecule CGRP receptor antagonists. And they are smaller, so they have a limited ability to cross the blood-brain barrier versus monoclonal antibodies, which are antibodies that are formed in a lab to mimic a natural antibody's ability to stick to and destroy antigens. And within that, there's two types, and some act against the molecule of CGRP itself, and others act against its receptors more similarly to gepants. Next slide, please. So gepants, they were found in several studies to be significantly more effective than placebo, and they have similar response in terms of other non-CGRP drugs on the market. And in case you're wondering why there needs to be a new exploration of drugs outside of these existing ones, a lot of drugs for migraines on the market cause issues with blood pressure and blood sugar, and are also just not very effective for a lot of individuals. So having a wide range of treatment options is the best way to make sure that as many people are able to find relief from this pain as possible. So some issues with these gepants are first-gen gepants were found to result in liver toxicity in that they inhibited bile acid transport, they induced mitochondrial toxicity, and they generated oxidative stress. This could all be dangerous, especially for people with existing histories of liver problems. So moving forward, 4 gepants were officially FDA approved and are currently on the market, but they were released with a warning of liver toxicity. Next slide, please. So monoclonal antibodies. These were also found in several studies to be significantly more effective than placebo for episodic migraine. And phase 3 trials also suggest that they could maybe be used for chronic migraine as well. Some issues with this treatment is CGRP also regulates postoperative sepsis and promotes vasodilation. So the antibodies that are targeting the molecule itself prevent this effect and can cause issues with inflammation, especially in individuals who are already vulnerable to infection. So moving forward, there is currently no warning issued for the FDA-approved monoclonal antibodies, and this can be very dangerous for the groups vulnerable to infection or with blood pressure issues. So this is something that should definitely be looked into in the future. Next slide, please. Discussion. Next slide, please. So there are some other treatment avenues that haven't been explored as much as CGRP. So the first being pituitary adenylate cyclase activating polypeptide, or PACAP. PACAP infusion causes migraine headache, similarly to CGRP. So PAC1, VPAC1, and VPAC2 receptors, all associated with PACAP, were identified in the trigeminal ganglia that we discussed earlier. And so this is also a potential target for future migraine. Also being looked into is potassium channels, which so these treatments seek to locally constrict vessels in the head to identify key channels for migraine pain reception. So looking for further down that cascade, so that we're not targeting CGRP directly, so we're not having some of those more dangerous side effects. And looking into nitrous oxide channels is the same methodology as the potassium channels. Next slide, please. So my final thoughts being CGRP is an exciting and effective new frontier in the treatment of migraine, and it's very promising for patients who did not respond to traditional migraine medications. But there are also some complications that patients should be aware of when exploring this new medication avenue. Next slide, please. So thank you for coming to my presentation, and feel free to ask any questions.
All right, great job, Tatiana.
Thank you.
We have a question here. How did you decide to focus on CGRP-based treatments in your research?
So I knew I wanted to study migraines because my mom and my brother both suffer from chronic migraines, and I've seen how debilitating that can be. So when I was discussing like targets with my mentor and like looking into some existing treatments for migraine, CGRP just kept coming up, and I saw how exciting this frontier is and how much there is on it and how like just big it is for the migraine community. And I decided that like I wanted to learn more about that and look into if it really was like this miracle drug that everyone was saying it was.
Awesome. Is there really a migraine community?
Yeah, I think like especially in online spaces, there's a lot on, and especially a lot of like complaints about the existing issues with migraines, and the scientific community exploring migraines specifically definitely exists, and I've noticed that through my research.
Very interesting. Great job. And great job working through all the tech issues as well.
Thanks.
Great work.